mentioned, these first two people were in fact Castilian Spanish. And as a number of us cousins have done our genealogy, it's true. Now, we are also a few other things, but that came later in the history. So their children married other ethnicity children, and I have cousins who are Native American. I have cousins who are Afro-Latino. California has a very interesting history when you go back further than this family in California, and I'll show you how we're connected to history that's even earlier than when this family came here. This fourth boy, so this is Juan Antonio, he was 11 years old when he came here. So he was one of the younger boys. There was a 17-year-old, a 15-year-old, a 13-year-old, and he was the 11-year-old boy. When he married, so Juan Antonio married Francisca Avila Alvarado Peña. Francisca, her father was the Francisco Avila that built the Avila Adobe in Los Angeles. I'm sorry, it was her grandfather who built the Avila Adobe in Los Angeles. That Adobe is still standing, and the history that's been done on Francisca's family is very interesting. She's related, they have her traced back to the soldier who came with a Portola expedition. So this is a very old family in California, and she brought the interest of education, she brought the interest of history. She was a very interesting woman, and as I discussed her further, one value that this family, at least in my line, and I can't speak for everybody's line, mostly because I don't know, there was a great love of education. And Nestora, as I had mentioned, the youngest child of this family, who was only 4 when they came, she was sent to the convent in Benicia, and she learned how to read and write, and she came back and she taught whoever was here how to read and write. She was a storyteller too, and there started to appear a sort of pattern in the family where there was always one female woman storyteller in the family at a time. Francisca was one, Nestor was another. Her children, so she had more than 2 children. Her 2 living children that are connected to me was Vidal, who was my grandfather, and Rose. Rose was another woman who was educated in our family. So far we have Nestor, Francisca, and Rose who were educated. I find this really impressive during this period of time in history to have anybody educated, let alone women being educated. So it was a value that passed along. And when it got to Rose and Vidal, as I said, were brother and sister. Vidal was my grandfather. Vidal, who was groomed to be an attorney. So as we all know about California history and the kind of issues that the ranchos had with losing their land over the problems with some of their maps or their sueños, they were very erratic. You know, there were all kinds of disputes over the lines because they weren't precise and they weren't exact. Well, they reared an attorney. He actually went to law school, Vidal did. And then Vidal was hired then by Nestora, and this is the tie-in back to the original family. Nestora lived here almost until she died in this house. So she lived here from the 1840s to 1918. She lived for a short time in Vacaville before she passed away in 1922. She did not have children, living children of her own. She and her husband lived here for some time, and they raised her niece, who was a Vaca. So they're now related to the Vacas. So she raised that niece who owned the property, but until I believe the 1950s, she had that land. This is another reason why this this Adobe is so special, is because it stayed in the hands of the family for so many years. So Rose was a storyteller. Most of the information we have recorded. There's a book that she wrote through other people that gave her recollections. For the most part, what she said, we've been able to verify in one way or the other. Probably one of the only things that still doesn't fit is that she still insisted we were Peñas and not Armijos. But the land, we know now the story, that somehow he did in fact change his name. So Rose lived to be in her 90s. I remember her when I was a small child. I got to meet her, and I had this very interesting feeling of being able to reach back into time. I mean, she's talking about the days when, when there was still a bowl of gold at the door where the traveler would come in and put some gold and take gold if he needed it when he left. I mean, she came from a completely different time. Sometimes when I'm telling my stories and people realize how many years back I'm taking them, through them, they look at me with their mouth open, and I can tell that the same thing is happening, where I'm almost now like the key, and I'm one of the artifacts from the past, when your memories, when people whose memories go back so many years, that really you feel history as a living thing. And that is how this family got to be. Now the doll, I told you, was hired by Nestora. She was hired by Nestora, he was hired by Nestora to be one of the last mayordomos. She still had an 1,000-acre ranch here. So she inherited the land. Somehow she inherited the lands. All the boys went off and did their own thing, had their own crops, had their own ranchos, their farms, or whatever. But the family that stayed here was Nestora. And Nestora hired my grandfather Vidal to manage her ranch. And therefore, my father and his sister were born in this adobe house. I think that the reason that they were born here might have been two reasons. Certainly, their father was working here. That could have been one reason. But I also think it was because of the specialness of it. That they could later say, since my father now was being groomed to be the heir, that they could say that they were born in that adobe. And it's certainly an interesting fact when you can point to the bedroom where my father was actually born, and that it's my father, who was born in 1904.